one of my all-time heroes in design, Murray Moss. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, actually. I'm really so happy to see you because you've been really important with us and for both Franklin and I and not just in the sort of businessy thing, but just the fact that we were all sort of crazy, we were doing, and you were, I'm proud to say you were looking at the future. You could see what it would be, and very few people could do that. I mean, it was really a daunting, to say the least, prospect. And then our circumstances were so nice and kind of amusing because we really didn't begin in the fair, in the Design Miami event. You set us up outside of that. And then what was amusing was that the next year, the other people insisted that we could be part of Design Miami. So we had do you remember?
Right. I mean, it was such an incredible thing. So Design Miami had a rigorous policy that you had to be a gallery.
Yeah.
Plus, Moss was a gallery, but also sold commercial design products. They were saying it wasn't a gallery, but we couldn't have the show without having you in the neighborhood. So we gave you, as you mentioned, that space near the show. And then when you sold out of everything the first year, your toothbrush, I still have, by the way, the Martin Bass table. It's in Design Miami.
Oh, dude.
Yep, love that piece. But when you sold out of everything, then the dealer said, wait a minute, Moss needs to be in the show.
But but what was amazing was you gave us a space, I think, like bigger than the Moore building. I mean, it was an amazing space. And also it was, for me, the first time that I encountered the need to go with it. In other words, I am very controlling, and I, up until then, any kind of quote unquote exhibition or showing something, I was very, very, specific, very precise with it. And we couldn't do that in this case. But what I saw was possible was to just appropriate fast a raw but sort of gorgeous space. And we found you taught me to look for what's there and what's not there, basically. And that was a very wonderful thing. Thank you.
And Murray, when you think about it, because I went through this experience in a different way, you really bridged that moment between design, which was collectible, but wasn't shown as being collectible. It was more mass produced, but still there were like crazy, beautiful design pieces, like the Campagna brothers doing the rope chairs for Adra, for example. But Design Miami was that moment where limited edition contemporary design really got put on the map, kind of adjacent to art. And you were like the bridge between those moments. And I think that's why we had that first year experience. And then everyone realized you are a gallery.
Well, they realized we were going away. That was maybe the main part. But what I recall about what you just said, what I recall as the crux of it was, we would have, more often than not, people would say something like, I think we should get that one because it's the most like art. That was like so there was kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, but and of course, from a financial point of view, compared to what was being considered as the fine art, it was very inexpensive. As high as prices seemed to be, it was actually interesting. But also, you made it so glamorous, and I know that's maybe not the coolest thing I should say, but we really looked forward to it, and I would say probably the most glamorous moment really in my life was when we were out in the evening and about to go to your incredible house for the party, you know, the whole year. And we were traveling with Matt Turnauer, who we would introduce to people as our biographer. And it was fantastic. It was really good. And don't you think that there was a kind of, it wasn't about commerce at those moments. It was about the people you had access to the people who were making those things, designing those things, and access to the people who at that time were interested in those things. I mean, that was not a huge crowd. That was very particular.
It was the birth of something new. I think that taking Art Basel and then combining like the best art fair in the world with the sex appeal of Miami created like a moment in the cultural world where people internationally want to celebrate culture. And then with the birth of Design Miami, it was like Miami was actually offering something to this global cultural dialogue. Like design is collectible just as art is, and not just if it's an antique. You could have contemporary collectible design. You lived quite a life before Moss. And what are some of the adventures and how did they lead to the launch of Moss in 1994? Like, what happened before and what were you doing before you opened Moss?
I opened the store when I was 45. So I had already had a couple careers. I started out. I started out as an actor, and I went to university first in New York, and then to Columbia, and then I went to NYU School of the Arts. And the only thing I wanted to do when I was in high school was get out of Lincolnwood, Illinois, and get myself to New York. And so I started, and the funny thing was, for some reason, I remember this isolated evaluation, which was a year after I arrived. It was New Year's Eve, and I was at a table at Sardi's with Paul Newman. And I thought, how did this happen? And it was just like, I don't know, I grabbed onto anything I was so enamored of New York. It was so exciting to me. And so I started acting, and then I came into a little bit of money from my family when I was in my mid-20s. And so a friend of mine said, "Oh, you have some money now, you should start a fashion company." So I started a fashion company, and then I immediately lost all my money. And it was 12 years of really, really difficult work and a lot of cigarettes at the time to sort of come out of that, and having had an incredible education in the process. But and during that time, I moved manufacturing to Italy, so I lived for a good part of the year. First in Biella, which is in the north of Italy, and then I lived in Florence, and I had a little office in Florence, and that's what got me interested in because then I sold that company to a Japanese license, and I took 5 years to try to think. I didn't want to be a clothing executive, so I didn't know what to do, and I remembered that I had seen, because I was there so often, all these things that I used in my daily life, regular functional industrial things, which were not, I didn't recognize them. They were not, to my knowledge, available in America. So that's
you were always involved in creativity, but different. And then in 1994, you opened Moss. This is 11 years before Design Miami. So a
Yeah.
radically different world. And at that time, what was your vision for Moss, and how is it different from anything else that you knew of that existed?
Well, I didn't relate. I found that I was relating to functional objects, glasses, a juicer, a radio, a light, in a way that was different than the way they were generally being offered, which was, I didn't think people needed to be told, needed to put chairs in the chair area, lest you make a mistake and buy a chair instead of a lamp. I mean, it was obvious that it was a chair. So I thought, what would I do as a merchant? How would what would I contribute to this? Because it was redundant for me to just, group things as they came and wait for somebody to buy them. So I wanted to present the ideas that, for some reason, that was what was more interesting to me from the beginning, before I started the store, than the function, and that didn't sit well with a lot of people, because there was a feeling that functional things, there needs to be a straight line between the problem and the solution. That was the idea, and that wasn't interesting to me. So I would put things in different groupings. Like I felt that it would be interesting to show, people would look where I pointed them to look. That was my idea, that shopping was a kind of like a theater experience, that it was appropriate for me to take control, and to deliver a good show. But to do that, I had to have rules. You couldn't bring your dog, you couldn't eat your sandwich, you couldn't talk to your neighbor, the lights were dimmed, you saw what I told you to see, you faced the direction that I insisted you face. I had a hand railing. I broke up the visuals into a moment that one eye could see, the entire suggestion. And it was just that, basically, which at the time I think was unusual. It also, when people get angry, they wake up, and I didn't care if they were angry as much as I cared that they'd be awake.
So give us a little insight. When you started, what design work were you showing? And then over time, how did it evolve?
Well, what was interesting was people identified the contemporary industrial design as something where the main component of it was that it was new. It was something new. And I thought that the world goes so fast, and having come from the fashion, so wasteful, things go so fast, that I wanted to slow people down. And so the first things that I bought were things that were very ubiquitous, like Alvar Aalto vase. Like that was my first window display. But I bought one only, but of all of the models in every color, because it occurred to me that what, for me personally, they represented, they suggested to me, was all of the lakes in Finland. So I bought one of each in every color. And I did this big puzzle, of all these things. And I think I wrote something like the lakes of Finland. And then it turns out, having done that, I was suddenly the biggest vendor of each, and Alto vases in the country. And they took me to Finland soon after that, because they felt they had a live wire, somebody who was sort of, but I felt that my responsibility, my contribution to the deal, was that I needed to communicate what these people had done. That was my job.
And I watched this evolve over time. You really developed strong relationships with the designers you represented. how did that happen? Explain this connection you had to designers.
Well, first of all, a lot of that had to do with you because you created something very unusual, which was well, it was an atmosphere that you didn't want to waste it. You wanted to take it. You went there during that time because you could speak to your peers, and to the group and advance. Things could happen there. And I don't know how to do that. But you did that very brilliantly. And, but basically I'm not a materialistic person. I don't really care about things. And
But you
so,
say that, and at the same time, I know you're one of the most incredible collectors I've ever met of design. So,
well, what interests me, thank you, that's a huge compliment, but over the time, especially, where I ended up was actually not looking at things, but just talking to people, because I had something incredible happen to me, which was I was given access to these people who were willing to talk to me, who were making these things, and for a reason. They were burying in them their own agenda. They would accomplish the agenda of the manufacturer that they were hired by. And this goes for everyone, but then they would put something in it additional because it was their right.
so Murray, in the design district here in Miami, I see like it's become such a thing. Like there'll be a new product, Louis Vuitton collaborates with Supreme, and you get these like long lines. Kanye launched his Pablo thing here, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and the same kind of situation. But Moss, I mean, from the beginning was legendary for these crazy opening parties that you would do, which saw lines of people waiting to get in. How did you create that phenomenon then? Because it was before this world we're in today.
Well, I think that's just that we are shallow enough that we get. Like that wasn't even work. And it was Franklin, really. Franklin knows how to do. I mean, he was in television. He produced Sesame Street. He ran all these channels in London. He knew how to get a crowd going. It's just a thing. And in the fashion, Franklin and I used to do, although he wasn't in the fashion company with me, we would we sort of do these big fashion shows. And we were really the first American entity to go outside of a normal venue. And like I remember the Ed Sullivan Theater to do, a fashion show. And it was like, so this wasn't really hard for us. And one of the ways to advertise, to advertise that you are a hot ticket is to simply make people wait. I mean, it was pretty, simple, but it was the place that people, I think people were shocked that overall we took such control and we had such chutzpah. It was like, we were very serious about what we were doing. It wasn't a sham. And we felt that we were going to simply control it, as we wished. And I think that was, although press wrote about it as possibly we were losing an audience, quite the contrary, we were gaining one.
And I remember distinctly, it was a blow to all of us in 2012 when you and Franklin decided to close Moss and begin the next chapter. What were the responses? How did people react to you at that moment? Because it was a tough moment for me, and I just can't imagine.
It was a very difficult moment. I mean, it wasn't nice. We didn't want to close, but in 2008 we had that we were overextended because we had opened up galleries in Los Angeles. Two of them, I was working on a special gallery project with Philippe Stark for the new hotels that were opening up. And we were really spread out there. Los Angeles didn't work for us, although it was for me my favorite dream place I ever wanted to be. And so I didn't, I mean, it was horrific to actually close. And I remember what we decided to do was to invite people in the press over to our house for breakfast and to explain to them that this was what we were doing, but that we were not going away. What we were going to do was go to an office and we were going to show people work, connect people to each other and see how we could function as a bureau. We called ourselves Moss Bureau, and we started to get clients. What shocks me still, Craig, is that people have even heard of us because a lot of time has passed and things go very quickly. And people were born after, we closed. So why do they even know? Why do they even know us? That was a big shock to me, actually.
Well, I think that part of it is you played such a strong role in defining contemporary design culture over the years, and were associated with the success of great contemporary designers. I mean, I mentioned Martin Bass and the Campagna brothers, and you were so fundamental to putting them on the map and making them known. Are you still out there scouting talent? I need some hints of what I should be looking at.
I in a different way, yes, because I'm not necessarily for for the purpose in mind, other than personal, but I'll look at something that I'm particularly interested in, things that are given no value, that I am particularly interested in the hard fight. Like I look at something and I'll go, if I can put aside all of my criteria, my usual evaluation process, whatever that might be, and just look at it, and if I can't help myself but like it, then I get very interested in that. And I'm interested in things, not, as I said, to consume something, but because they're basically, for me, sort of two languages, two vocabularies. There's the written and the spoken, which I'm remedial in. I thought it was very difficult to read and to process that. And then there's the visual language, which I'm better at, I'm more comfortable at. So, if you exercise that over the other for a long number of years, hard to stop.
So now I want to know, this is the big question. What are some of the highlights from the collection that you're presenting with Design Miami? What's coming up?
These are things which are personal, and I know that my attraction, what I find interesting in something, will of course be different than someone else's. So like Martin, I would scout at the sort of student graduation project things that would be held in Eindhoven, and eventually they were also shown in Milan during the fair time. And when I first met Martin, he was a kid. The work he had done to date was what I was looking at, which was 3 pieces of burned things that were his graduation project.
I bought one of those desks from you. I bought one of those burned desks from you.
Well, yeah, that's pretty great. But I didn't get it. I didn't get that when I first saw it. I thought, this is a superficial treatment. This is not interesting. And I just walked. I went home. But then something about Martin, made me feel that I missed it, that I was wrong. And so, although I didn't want to, I went back to Europe, and I arranged for him to meet me. We met in Paris, and we met for coffee at this breakfast. And I said to him, I came back because I want to know, why did you burn things that you didn't care about? Why did you burn ugly things? And he said, because I was afraid that people would mistake my action as something which was hostile, and it wasn't. And then it occurred to me as he talked that what he was saying was that he burned his education. What he wanted to do was burn his education. He wanted to show that we step on the shoulders, of those that came before us in whatever jobs or professions or whatever we are participating in, and we transform them into our work. We owned them then. We put our name on it, even though you can recognize the origins that it came from, the legacy. And I thought that was pretty damn good. But to do that, you have to go buy real things that you care about, that other people won't necessarily want to see you burn, and you have to burn them in a way which is artful, and then I have to present them to people and say, these are valuable to us because. And having done that with somebody, it's like you fought a war. You become quite close, And Martin is incredible as an artist. He just, because what Martin will also do, he's fearless, absolutely fearless. And he'll take something, we did the burn things, it'll be a big hit. And then he will do his next collection, entirely abandoning that and doing something in a new material in a completely new way. That I like a lot and respect him for. So that's sort of.
I'll never forget, Martin was the youngest person ever to receive the Designer of the Year award from Design Miami.
Yeah.
And that year he did the precursor of the grandmother clock.
Oh, yeah.
When he created like a booth, and inside the booth he had someone who through the show would erase the time and move it, and just kept adjusting it. And it was like this incredibly brilliant, powerful installation that then ended up being, I think a masterpiece of contemporary design.
Yeah. No, I think, when I talk to Martin, he's one of the few people, by the way, that I remained on a personal basis close to, Martin and Hella remain just more, it's way beyond a business thing, because there isn't that now. It's just people you love, that's what I walked away with was, and we encourage each other, we support each other in many ways, which as I get older, I find a beautiful, really wonderful thing. And even Moss became, which I hadn't realized, nor I think Franklin, it became a kind of school. We became a kind of, by that I mean not an educational school, but like a school of thought, of like-minded people, whatever that is.
And I'm a student, Murray, and I can prove it. Right over here, just that angle in the corner is a Martin Bass fan.
Oh, yeah,
and
great.
Behind the Prouvé desk that's just behind me in my office is a daybed and 2 chairs by Hella.
Oh, great.
So here, I'm definitely one of the students of your teaching.
I'm curious to know where you're going. because yeah, I would just soon follow. And what's good? What does it feel like there now?
I mean, it'd be amazing if you came to the design district. I don't think you would recognize it.
Really? Yeah.
We keep adding things, and it's becoming more and more of a community. As it was from the beginning, it's equally dedicated to creativity and culture. So it remains an outdoor museum of art, architecture, and design. But then there's a lot of creative businesses doing things here, and
Yeah.
their activation. So I'm focused on trying to figure out at each stage, like as we have a little more success, how we can reinvest and make it an even better, more exciting place. And it's transformed. It's
I'm
much
sure.
different than the last time you visited. And I'm also starting to think about other things to do. Uh, things involving technology. I've been working with Tesla Solar, and
Yeah.
I think that there's something really powerful still to be unearthed there. Some of these other like technology things, but I don't know where it'll lead. I'm having a lot of fun, enjoying the experience of life, and I keep collecting.
Yeah. But do the principles which you're using to identify things you want in the collection change? Does your collection change because you are focusing on different things, a new technology, or
So generally with art and design, I try to find people that I want to collect over time and in depth. That's my goal. And of course, part of that is you have an experience where you get something, you have it, and you like really want to get more. You see how that person evolves, and they're inventing something that seems like a real step forward, and it's exciting, or I don't. So that's the kind of core of my collecting. But then collecting leads you to other things. Like I use as an example in art, uh, I was collecting a lot of the young California artists in the 90s. And then I realized that their teacher, all of them had the same teacher, John Baldessari. So I
oh
started
yeah,
to collect John Baldessari. And of course, after spending a certain amount of time collecting Baldessari and realizing what an incredible conceptual artist he was, well, I had no choice. I had to go and buy a work by Marcel Duchamp. There's new discoveries, but it's very dependent on the rare visionaries like you that are out there looking at things and create the opportunity for someone like me to see it. Murray, what's the best advice you've ever received?
don't be a dancer.
What advice would you have for an emerging collector?
I would say take a vacation from your convictions and your criteria that you know, and put it aside before you do anything else. Start at the beginning.
It's great. Great advice. What are you most proud of?
Uh, Franklin, I think we got married, and just I think 3 years ago here when I moved to Connecticut, and I'm proud of the fact that we've gone through 50 years now, all these things, good and not so good, but it's overall, I'm so happy. I'm so happy with it, with my life, and that's a privilege. That's a great privilege, and I'm proud of it because we didn't really have a model. You know, we made it up, and I think we did that well.
I've watched, you've had such a dynamic and powerful partnership on many levels too, from
Yeah.
personal to work. I mean, you are an incredible team.
Yes, I think we are actually. I feel it wasn't a goal. I don't think you get any points for long-term relationship. It isn't about, that wasn't the goal, but it just gets more and more, I don't know, what rich. I mean, the experience is, and that's why we don't, we don't like to retire. We have no intent to retire. We're doing quite the opposite. We're putting as much on our plate, as the saying used to be, as we can, because we feel best when we're engaged, when we're doing things.
Well, today during this talk, you've really enlightened me. I never understood why you were the guy on the camera and Franklin was in the background, but now I know you're the actor and he's the producer.
Yeah. Let's just say I was the actor who got parts that actually had a name.
Murray, it's so great to see you. Thank you for
Greg.
doing this. I'm just dying to see what pops up in Design Miami. The show is going to be extraordinary.
It's going to be good. Thank you. Thanks. I love seeing you. You're great. Thank you.